Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
This is the town hall, so let's get to some questions.
Let's do it.
The first question is from Adam.
How are you, Senator Vance?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Pretty good, a little tired. For the last 14 days, myself, my fiance, and these awesome pilots behind us have been delivering supplies all over Western North Carolina.
God bless you guys. God bless you all. We love you. We're proud of you, and we're so grateful to you.
The question is, can we have the conversation about revamping a national disaster strategy so that we can utilize retired veterans and special operations personnel who have been leading the charge hands down in Western North Carolina and effectively provided food, supplies, and medical aid and assistance to thousands and thousands of lives, and revamping the national disaster strategy in the United States so that we can make it more effective?
I am sick and tired of weak representation in Washington. Aren't you? I think it's about time we have leadership with backbone in Congress. As a Green Beret and founder of Savage Freedom's Relief Operations, my team, the people of Western North Carolina, and I demonstrated to the governor and the Biden regime exactly what the backbone of the mountains looks like. That's why I'm going to D.C. I'm Adam Smith, and I'm running for Congress in Western North Carolina, and I approve this message.
Good afternoon, friends and patriots, and welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday on the Rad Mania Show. And we're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, folks, North Carolina, it's showing us exactly what the fight for real change looks like when everyday Americans get fed up with business as usual in Washington, the swamp. And my guest today, you just saw him. He didn't wait for permission or perfect polling numbers. He stepped up. As a retired Green Beret, a devoted family man, and the founder and CEO of Savage Freedoms. After Hurricane Elaine devastated Western North Carolina, Adam Smith and his team mobilized veterans, volunteers, helicopters, millions of pounds of critical supplies to the people the system left behind. The same no-nonsense leadership and spirit of service is exactly why Smith made a bold GOP primary run for Congress in North Carolina's 11th district. He challenged the establishment on the issues politicians only talk about when it's politically safe, and we're going to show you that today. He saw the gap between empty promises and what communities actually need on border security, government accountability, and putting America first without apology. And today we're going to talk about what it really takes to drive change against this tempest of entrenched power, especially as we watch critical signals coming from the courts, like the Supreme Court today, from Congress, as feckless as it is, and the front lines of national security and counterterrorism. Adam Smith, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Colonel Maness, thanks for having me. I truly appreciate it. Man, what a monologue. Holy crap.
That's the best, other than my Gator political ad, which one a poly, I might add, have to get hats off to the team that put that together, where I wrestled an alligator. I think that is the best political ad that I've ever seen. And you know why? Because it's a real American that already doing real things, that's putting his money and his courage and his reputation where his mouth is and his actions are, and stepping up to see if he can help save this country. And I want to say I thank you and appreciate you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate it. That means a lot, Colonel. It really does. And thanks for those words. It was an interesting experience, to say the least.
And that's why I wanted to get you back on. Let's tell the American people. Let's tell the American people what Adam Smith learned. They've heard me talk about my experience for over 10 years now, but I want them to know what Adam Smith, somebody that's new to the political arena, what did you learn? What's the number one thing you learned from this race?
It's going to be the worst thing to say because it's the worst thing to consider and actually like admit to. But that is, money is the only way to win an election. And money is the only way to go against incumbency across the United States. The reason why incumbents win 96 to 98% of the time, both in renominations and re-elections, is because they have access to so much money. For those people who don't know about franking dollars, every congressman and senator is allocated so much money from taxpayer dollars through franking money in order for them to do legislative updates to their constituents in their area that they represent. On top of that, not only do they have a limited amount of time where they can use franking dollars, but they also have their campaign funds. So in the lead up to, 60 days before an election, they can utilize those franking dollars ad nauseum in order to communicate non-campaign related materials and legislative updates. But we all know exactly what that looks like and exactly what they're doing, especially when incumbents only use those franking dollars just before the kind of that dark time 60-day period before the election period happens. And then they get into their campaign funds. So lesson number one, you can't win if you don't have money. Lesson number two, the system is designed to keep incumbents in power so that the parties can retain their position of superiority. The thing that I think is the biggest takeaway of all is that the two-party system in the United States has kind of become the modern monarchy. And if you are in favor with the king, then the favor gives you, the king gives you the blessing to take action, to run, to potentially take one of those seats and hold one of those seats and, in theory, be of service to the people. But if you're not in favor of the king, then the two-party system that is the modern monarchy will suppress you and suppress your voice. The rules in the plan of organization, the rules that the party puts forward with regards to its own self-governance are more akin to guidelines for the people that are already in an incumbency or an incumbent position, but they are definitively not allowed to be broken by those who are upstart or new candidates stepping into the arena for the first time. So it's a legitimate battle. The establishment really has done a great job of maintaining its position of power by making it near impossible for people to run against them.
Yeah, that's why I chose the word tempest. The tempest to me is an all-powerful wind that you can't defeat it. All you can do is take cover and put your head down in order to stay alive. And that this tempest of power, I mean, you described the same exact things that I saw when I first ran for U.S. Senate in 2014. Nothing has changed. So you would agree with me that the House of Representatives arm at the national level of the Republicans, which is the National Republican Congressional Committee, the mission is to recruit and elect and reelect Republicans to maintain their majority or gain the majority if we don't have it, right? But it's really about protecting incumbents mostly.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the mission. The mission is supposed to find individuals. The NRCC, ultimately, their job is to find individuals who would be good representatives for the people. But the way the system has shifted and changed, the game is played very differently now than what it was under the time of our founding fathers. There was a time when statesmen truly ruled the day, and they believed that their job was to selflessly serve the nation and then be done and go home. We see more often than not politicians who become career politicians whose sole target in life is not to selflessly serve the people, but to selfishly serve self in order to maintain that position of significance. Say that 10 times fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to say I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised that nothing's changed. And I stay active in the political party, so I see it at the local and state level too. So let's see. You ran because you saw the lack of response, not politically, but the lack of response of the federal government to help the people of Western North Carolina after Hurricane Elena. I mean, your video is spot on accurate on that, right? So
yeah, that was a big part of it.
What is the incumbent that won facing any legitimate opposition, or is he just going to walk in on a walk?
Oh no. I would say it's very interesting right now. So the DCCC at the national level, they have targeted the DNC for those who don't know DCCC, but the at the national level they have targeted 12 or 13 different districts throughout the United States for something called the Red to Blue program, and these are districts that have lost their grading, their score into the Cook's grading scheme, and have had a downgrade, and they see that those particular districts are it's a great opportunity to take them over again. So they're going to pump millions and millions and millions of dollars into these districts in order to try and unseat the incumbents. And the guy that he's racing against here in Western North Carolina is a Democrat, the primary Democrat candidate, a guy named Jamie Yeager. His family has a long-standing history in North Carolina politics. They've always been Democrats. His dad, John, was a Democrat and served in the General Assembly. His family's got a history of being in the political spectrum. They understand how to play the game. And the Democrats, they already blessed him off. They anointed him prior to the primary. It actually created a large sort of uprising in the local Democrat Party with other candidates that were very upset about this. But Jamie Yeager has a legitimate chance to win against Chuck. And I don't even like saying that. And as much as I dislike Chuck's politics when it comes to his position as a Republican, I dislike Jamie's politics even more because you know as well as I do, if you become an elected member in the Democrat Party, if your job is to toe the line, period, end of discussion. It is a totalitarian regime in the Democrat Party. And if you don't toe the line, they'll out you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There's a time and a place for everything. The primary is the time for Republicans to fight against each other, and the general election is the time where we need to save our seat if it needs saving, especially if we have gotten the seat already. Look, the best political speech I ever gave was on behalf of my Republican nominee opponent in the U.S. Senate, who happened to be the same Republican that voted to convict Donald Trump in his second impeachment. But I had to do it.
Yeah.
I had to do it. We talked amongst the family and talked to my advisors, and we had to do it. So I went around the state and campaigned with him because we had to get the Democrat out of there that had been whose family had been entrenched in Louisiana politics for 75, 80 years.
Jamie Yeager actually gives me less pause for concern than Roy Cooper does. So the previous governor, actually the governor who was in office at the time of Hurricane Helene and when it struck, Cooper was in New York raising money for his Senate race because he knew he wasn't going to run for re-election for governor and had already been established. And Josh Stein won and Cooper left. But now we have a Senate race between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley. And Michael Whatley ran against Don Brown. Don Brown has, I don't know if you know Don or not, but Don has a very long-standing history of being a significant activist within the conservative movement in general. He is a lawyer. He was a former Navy JAG officer, phenomenal candidate. But Don lost handedly to Whatley. And here's the problem that we're going to face. Whatley is the former, NC GOP chair, and he moved mountains in order to support President Trump in this last election. And he did a great job of mobilizing the people to get out to vote. With that being said, Roy Cooper is a legitimate threat. And we go back to the Democrat Party and the DNC, they're going to pump, and there's an estimate that this is going to be into the billions of dollars when it comes to the Senate race between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley. And if we lose that Senate seat, that is going to be a significant hit to our ability to actually move policy and codify executive orders.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's tough because the closer you get to ground level in political life, the more people know who you really are. When you're at the national level, you can cloak yourself, especially when you get big endorsements. And Michael Whatley, I bet him, he seems like a really nice guy, and he worked really hard, as you mentioned, to get this president reelected. That's what he was asked to do when he became chairman of the Republican National Committee and chairman of the party. And he successfully did that. Unfortunately, though, when people know you, not everybody's going to like you. You can't make everybody love you or like you, as I'm sure you figured out. We got to take a break, Adam.
Oh, yeah.
When we come back, we'll see a little clip from Chuck Edwards. It's actually a news clip, but it's about him. We'll be right back with Adams.
North Carolina's 10 congressional Republican lawmakers are asking the new Secretary of Homeland Security, Markwayne Mullin, to review FEMA funding for Helene recovery efforts. In a letter, they write in part, quote, "We respectfully ask that you prioritize a comprehensive review of all unallocated FEMA funds designated for Hurricane Helene relief." They continued by addressing procedural and administrative issues so that the funds can get to communities in western North Carolina as quickly as possible. Specifically, Congressman Chuck Edwards has invited Secretary Mullin to visit the western part of our state.
Welcome back to the Rob Maida Show. It's a Wednesday. We're blowing the whistle a little bit here on the inside political efforts with retired Green Beret, the founder and CEO of Savage Freedoms, and now former congressional candidate in North Carolina against that incumbent, Chuck Edwards. You just heard his name mentioned there. Adam Smith is my guest today, and we're chatting about it and about the things that he learned in his first political race. And it's very interesting, Adam. I chose that clip because, that's like very recent, and I think we talked during the primary a couple of times, and I asked you if things were if you'd seen any like more aggressiveness out of your congressman coming up, in the fall and everything. And I seem to remember the answer was not much.
There wasn't much. There wasn't a lot of aggression from it. If we go back to the original response of Hurricane Helene, there wasn't a whole lot of there wasn't a lot of visibility with regards to his response on Hurricane Helene. And coming into the fall with regards to the election, the campaign season, there wasn't a whole lot of aggression on that part either. And now that we see that there's a change of leadership in DHS, now there's this effort to push it out. We also watched real time a change of messaging. He played the game very well. There was a real time change of messaging in the middle of campaign season with regards to his messaging as he put out. Ultimately, it's really hard to compete against or speak against an individual who was on the ground, and there's plenty of evidence that we were on the ground during the storm as compared to where he was at the time. So, again, it comes back to playing politics, comes back to playing this game. I will say this. I'm very happy that Senator Markwayne Mullin is the new Secretary of DHS. I think it's going to bring a breath of fresh air, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for us to really see some more movement here on the ground in western North Carolina. My question is this, and I will continue to ask this question. Why is it that we're just now writing a letter and, asking with much respect? Why isn't there more of a demand? Why aren't we banging on tables and flipping over desks? I feel like if we had been doing this from the very beginning, many of us local civilians, not representatives, not in any way in local government, took our own time and money and went to DC and knocked on doors and said, hey, something has to give, something has to change. Here's our recommendations. Why aren't we seeing change take place? And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's not a lot of movement taking place in these agencies, and there's not a lot of demand or accountability to these agencies taking place from our representatives. And I think that comes back to a threefold piece. What you said: one, campaign season. Let's not make a misstep, because if we make a misstep, then we may not get reelected or it could be used against us. Two, if we don't make ourselves readily available to the constituents, they can't hold us accountable. And three, we already know that as an incumbent, we have a 96 to 98% chance of winning the reelection. So why would we put ourselves at risk? And I think that speaks very highly of what our current political status is.
Yeah, it does. I'm not criticizing Congressman Edwards for sending the letter.
No.
I'm just concerned about the timing and if I were him, I would have been doing this several times since the Trump administration came into being, and probably during the Biden administration too, because the thing that got my attention that broke out of the letter was helping break bottlenecks. Well, you and I we've been talking about that the whole time. I didn't just interview you because you became a candidate. First time I interviewed you is because you came up on my radar as helping the people. One of the few people that had the organization together to really do good things. And so there's a balance between the electoral politics and political power in the office. And I think sometimes our incumbents, because they're so comfortable, they miss that and only think about the electoral politics piece of it, because this would have been a fabulous letter to send to Secretary Noem and make public. And maybe it happened, it just wasn't made public. from the North Carolina congressional delegation at the beginning of the administration, and then do it periodically as things go on. So the first one you send is not to the new secretary.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know as well as I do that consistent and constant pressure is the thing that actually creates the shift or change. And if you're not the squeaky wheel, especially at the national level, you're not going to get the attention that you need. Western North Carolina is the redheaded stepchild of the East Coast. We are constantly the region in the district, especially District 11, constantly forgotten. People think that North Carolina stops when you get to Charlotte, or when you get to Hickory, even. But it doesn't. You know, there's all this space in all this area and all these people that live in Western North Carolina who have literally carried the brunt of not just the disaster and the immediate emergency response, but also the long-term effort of recovery on the back end. I mean, Colonel, we just were able to start going vertical on somebody's house that we dedicated ourselves to rebuild, and it's taken us almost 12 plus months after the storm, in order for us just to get through the permitting process that the counties keep changing. Now, here's the thing. The General Assembly can work hand in hand with the congressional representation of that district in order to apply pressure at the county level for these things to be worked through. But there's not any effort there. It's sort of like it doesn't seem to be worth anybody's time. And so the people of Western North Carolina languish.
And there are still bottlenecks. That video is not very old. I mean, it's days old.
Days
let's take
old.
a
Yeah, the
question
letter
from
was
the
just
audience.
sent.
We've got a question from the audience. Go ahead, Joe.
We have Matt, sir.
So Adam, what was perhaps I'm guessing I think I already know the answer to this question anyway, but what was your biggest lesson learned that you're going to take with you next time you run in whatever cycle you choose to run in?
That's a good question. It's threefold. First lesson is this: raise money early. Second lesson, which is part of the first lesson, is have an army of support prior even to stepping into the effort. And the third lesson, which I think is part of playing the game, you have to learn how to play a bit of the game that's already established before you can change the game that you play. And that is, make certain that there is open lines of communication with the, quote, powers that be. Because if you can gain the support of the, quote, powers that be in order to become that person in that seat, once you hold that seat, you have a chance to actually make a change. Now, that doesn't mean that you compromise your morals. It doesn't mean you compromise your ethics. It doesn't mean you compromise your integrity. What it means is this: if you've ever played the game of Risk, and the guy to your left and the guy to your right, you shake hands with and say, I won't attack you from this position to the east, and I won't attack you from this position to the west, but I'm only going to move south. Once you move south and take over that territory, you attack them from the south, because that was not part of the agreement. And ultimately, that's how modern politics is played now. And it's sad to think that that's the case, but I think that's probably it. It's a game of Risk, and we have to be better at playing that game of Risk so that we can actually change the way it's played at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You point out something that a lot of us that have not been in politics before, that find ourselves in big races, aren't familiar with, and that is the nuances of being able to challenge the establishment, but at the same time, before you're doing a challenge, understanding where they're at, who they are, maybe even be part of an organization that's within that establishment, to know the players, understand what their goals are, understand how they work, and those kind of things, and try to be part of the team whenever you can, because that builds those relationships.
Yeah, and you have to ask yourself what you're doing it for. Like, what's the reason why you're running, or what's the reason why you even want to hold that position? And if it's not for the greater good, if it's not to be of selfless service to the people, even if you have this high-minded idea that you might be able to change the way the political landscape works in the United States, and then you recognize that it's a quagmire at some point. If you have your purpose, if your sole purpose is to be of service to the people, then you're doing it for the right reasons. And when that stops being the reasons, that's when you have to step away or change.
Yeah, that's so what are your thoughts based on what you've learned on things like term limits for Congress?
I think term limits are a necessity. I think term limits are a necessity, and the idea that we lose, we lose a wisdom or knowledge with regards to the system and how it works and functions is actually a benefit. I think term limits forces new blood into the legislature. On top of that, I think there has to be mandatory retirement for bureaucrats. I don't think that we can continue to have The largest employer in the United States, which is the government, which also becomes a self-licking ice cream cone of constantly justifying one's own existence. There's a reason why the bloated budget is so bloated, but there has to be forced retirement. You can't stay in for 25, 30, 40 years. You have to be forced retirement. So bureaucratic forced retirement, term limits for the Senate and Congress are a necessity. I think in so doing, we have the ability to change things over. I think we also have to look at that as a potential risk as well. You have countries like China that operate on a century cycle of strategic planning and considerations because of the longevity of their leadership. But that also comes with a cost to the people. So I'm not promoting communist China as the way for us to govern. I'm just saying when we look at these things, we have to weigh pros and cons of the decisions that we make, because there are pros and cons to all the above. And the greater opportunity we have to change leadership, greater opportunity we have to find a more effective leadership.
Yeah, absolutely right. But before we get to this break, I just want to ask you about raising money and the influence of money. You brought up China. Look, the Chinese foreign nationals are not allowed to give directly to candidates here in the United States. But we have seen evidence of funds flowing into the Democrat Party, even supporting maybe even Republican incumbents and those kind of things, because different companies that may be associated with the Chinese give money, and then certain things either happen or don't happen. It was a big fight to keep Huawei from being the 5G ownership of the United States of America. It was a big fight to stop DJI, a Chinese Communist Party-owned company, from being able to collect Intel data from every user that they sell a drone to here in the United States. It was a huge fight for that because of money, and the politicians aren't just protecting these corporations and everything. There's a reason. The money's going somewhere, and money's about power. We all know that, and the more you have, the more you can stay in place. So what'd you learn about money from the perspective of raising it when you juxtapose it against those kind of facts?
First thing is that raising money is extremely challenging as a new candidate. People want to put their money, or they want to back somebody who they really truly believe is going to win. Secondly, incumbents are in a position to generate more money because they already have enough name recognition as it is, and the argument is that, quote, they have a winning record. The fact of the matter is that they already owe favors. And in their owing of favors and handshake agreements that they've done behind closed doors and in quiet conversations, there is an invested interest by businesses across the United States, as well as potential foreign adversaries or foreign governments, and those individuals maintaining their position or their seat of influence at the national level. So, people say it's illegal for foreign entities to put money into U.S. campaigns. Well, apparently it's also illegal for fraud to happen with taxpayers' dollars, but we just saw billions of that happen in Minnesota. So to those individuals who say it's illegal, it doesn't happen, what I would say to you is this. 50 years ago, it was conspiracy theory that UFOs were real or not real. And now we have the federal government saying that UAPs are a real and legitimate thing. We had conspiracy theories about science taking place all over the world, about gain of function research on viruses or viral loads on individuals and humans. That was a conspiracy theory, and then we saw COVID and the information come out from there. So if you think that it's not happening, that foreign dollars are not getting pushed into U.S. campaign interests, you are willfully ignorant, and you have a great moment to learn something, because it's a real and legitimate issue that we're facing in the United States. Campaign finance reform has to change. I mean, there has to be massive reform for campaign finance. And I think that ultimately, not only is it campaign finance, but I also think recompense to the individuals that are serving as representatives. I would say that if you're a representative, you don't get to make $174,000 a year. I think what you get paid is the mean income of the district that you represent. And
that's a great idea.
And you do that for the district. And on top of that, I think that raising money to win in the district, you should only be able to raise within your district. I don't think you should be able to go outside of your district to raise money. I don't think that's ever going to change, Rob, but at least it's something that we could push.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. I appreciate it. We got to take another break. When we come back, I want to get your take on birthright citizenship. There's a big case happening right now at the Supreme Court. We'll be right back with Adam Smith.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
It would be unprecedented, a first according to historians. Let's take a live look at the Supreme Court, where security is always extremely tight, but you can bet it will be even tighter with the president saying he will be there later this morning. President Trump's daily schedule says he will certainly be at the Supreme Court today for oral arguments. The case involves whether the Trump administration can restrict birthright citizenship. The 9 justices will hear arguments about an executive order the president signed on his first day back in office, seeking to deny federal benefits to children born in the U.S. to illegal immigrants. The order was blocked by several judges who ruled that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to almost everyone born in the U.S. The president posting on True Social, quote, birthright citizenship has to do with the babies of slaves, not Chinese billionaires who have 56 kids, all of whom become American citizens. One of the many great scams of our time, President Donald J. Trump. Legal editor Carrie Urban offered this assessment earlier on Fox and Friends.
Typically, by the time they get to the arguments, a judge pretty much has decided where he or she is going to go. However, when it came to high-profile and complex matters, the arguments really mattered. And I think the same is going to be true today. So this could be something that the Supreme Court ends up punting to Congress and they fix. But let's just, it's not unheard of for a country to change course when it comes to birthright citizenship.
The president's position is the 14th Amendment is being exploited. Back to you guys in New York.
Yeah, it certainly is. Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and we're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And I might add, my guests and I will both be in the after show on Spaces for about a half an hour. This is how long I'll be there. So if you want to join us after that, that's great. We've got just about 26 minutes left in the show, the live video show here today. Adam Smith is my guest, retired Green Beret, former U.S. congressional candidate in North Carolina 11, and founder and CEO of Savage Freedoms. And Adam, had to get your take on this because we've talked many times about your views on illegal aliens, immigration, and those kinds of things. But I have to say the left's media was exploding, saying there's going to be a fracturing of the separation of powers if the president shows up to the Supreme Court, a place where the justices keep a chair reserved for the president of the United States. How'd you take that? I guess I could see.
I had this conversation literally last night, and somebody said, we don't we have 3 co-equal branches of government? And my response was, no, we do not. We don't have co-equal branches of government. The first 3 articles in the Constitution that establishes the legislature, the executive branch, and the judiciary, the reason why the judiciary was so small was because they didn't want the judicial branch to be able to, they didn't want the Department of Justice to be able to legislate from the bench. In essence, that's what we have now found ourselves with modern legislation. When it comes to the question of birthright citizenship, yes, the 14th Amendment that was established, I think, in July of 1868. Yes, there's a purpose to that amendment with regards to the citizenship clause and being born in the United States, being granted citizenship, that aspect. But you know what it doesn't apply to? It doesn't apply to foreign diplomats who the U.S. law doesn't actually apply to those individuals. So if a foreign diplomat comes to the United States and they have a child in the United States, that child is not going to be considered a U.S. citizen because they're a child of a foreign diplomat. So even that clause still has limitations and exceptions that are already part of that clause. So if that's the case, then I think it has to go to a deeper look, and the deeper look has to look at this from the reason of, are people illegally migrating into the United States and then immediately having children or doing it while they're pregnant in order for them to have a child that becomes a U.S. citizen, which gives them then an excuse to stay here longer and not get deported out of the country? If that's the case, then it's being misused. And if it is being misused, then we need to evaluate that. The constant emotional reaction from the left and the constant emotional reaction from especially the Democrat leadership at the national level, it's all just a ploy. It's just a game. It's in order to try and get all the hackles up of all the leftists across the United States, when that's not actually a functionary of what they're supposed to do. So is this a valid question to take to the Supreme Court? I think it is. And also, is this the destruction of the separation of powers? No, it's not the destruction of separation of powers. Absolutely not. In fact, I think it should be welcomed. I think the president should maybe go to the Supreme Court on more often and listen to the case law that's being argued and listen to precedents that are being brought up in these arguments and understand even better how it functions and operates.
Oh yeah, because if he was there today, I listened to pieces of it, and there's some crazy stuff being brought up, especially one Justice Ketanji Jackson, who,
oh my gosh,
in one argument thinks one way on the same exact issue, and in this argument thinks the opposite. You could go back and find the arguments. I'm not going to quote her on it because they're so nutty. But it's almost as if we don't really have a constitution and the amendments that go along with it. It's like they're deciding on something else, and that's just crazy.
It is, and I gotta say, for the fact that she even got successfully nominated and approved to become a Supreme Court justice is beyond me. I don't know if you saw the interaction with her during the hearings when she couldn't define what a woman was. I think that in of itself should sort of disallow you from holding that seat and holding that chair. And I'm sure I'll be criticized by the left and get more death threats like I did during the campaign. But the fact of the matter is that if you can't sit and define what a woman is, if you can't define a man and woman in a congressional hearing because you don't want to either upset the base or because you yourself can't actually do it because you've bought into the rhetoric from the left, that's not a position for you. And I've heard some of her arguments in the past about a few other things, and she does a very, very good job, like I will say, like innovative lawyers, to try and work loopholes into the gray space of language so that she can justify her position.
Oh, absolutely. Colorado's a state that tried to make a Christian cake maker bake gay cakes.
Yep.
Tried to make it's another Christian issue. Tried to use a law to make them bend to the will of the state and violate their Christian values. And then recently they just got overturned again, 8-1, about their wanting to keep Christians from counseling kids on conversion therapy, and they got overturned 8-1. I think in both of those. And guess who the outlier is? The outlier is Ketanji Jackson, man. It's unbelievable. Well, speaking of Christianity, I wanted to get your take on this. I don't have a video for it, but the Chicago Bulls fired and admitted they fired the guy for this, a guy because he came out on a video, not in a Bulls jersey. It was on his personal Instagram and said, "Hey, the NBA essentially is forcing pride events on me, and I'm a Christian, and they're insisting that I support the unrighteous," and they fired him for it, and they admitted they fired him. Isn't that against the law in most states? I know it's against the First Amendment.
Well, it's obviously against the First Amendment, but it's not the state that's limiting speech at that point. It does come down to, one, what's his contract say? Is it wrong? Obviously, it's wrong. And it also speaks very highly to where we are. We are watching in real time Democrat leadership and leftists all over the United States get away with such levels of lunacy with the fraud that's taking place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Where is the prosecution? Where are the arrests? Where are the convictions? Where is the continued investigation? Why aren't people going to jail because of this? Why aren't politicians who are directly involved, who have been videoed and done videos and social media hits in these locations, why aren't they being questioned and investigated? The fact that the left can basically do whatever they want to do and get away with it at this point speaks highly of, one, the uniparty at the national level, and two, I think a lot of times the fear of conservatives, Christian conservatives, constitutionalists, that they're afraid to step up. They're afraid to speak out because they're going to get canceled. They're going to get attacked. They're going to get death threats because the left can do whatever the left wants to do right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of people have brought up Colin Kaepernick. A lot of the lefties have said, hey, you guys didn't have a problem with us. Well, yeah, but he was in uniform on the field. It was while he was doing his job. This guy was on his own personal Instagram, not even wearing a jersey.
Kaepernick wasn't even a good football player.
Well, you got that too. That's why he never made another team, even though he had I don't know how many opportunities he's had, but it's been more than one to try to get back on a team. You're right. It's just absolutely nuts what's happening with this. Well, let's see. I got one more thing before we get out of this segment. You're going to laugh at this too, but all right. So a judge has said that the president of the United States cannot build a ballroom connected to the White House.
Okay.
I've seen the drawings. If the drawings that I've seen are real, it's a magnificent addition. It's going to be beautiful. I think.
It seems to be beautiful. It's a great idea. I mean, ultimately, and it's interesting because when I worked in D.C., when I was at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I would go to lunch, do luncheons on the Hill with representatives and give them update briefings and security briefings on what we were doing in the office. Interestingly enough, we would talk about some of the events that were going to be hosted on the White House lawn. And every single time we talked about an event being hosted on the White House lawn, the representative I was speaking to or the senator I was speaking to would say the same thing. And they would say, I hate those events because it's always muddy. It's always soggy. There's never any coverage. There's never enough space. And this was just being conversation in passing. So, look, yet again, we come back to this position where the judiciary, what do they say? Smile and file. Lawyers in general, smile and file. You can file anything you want to file with any court and any judge. And ultimately, it's the judge that's going to have to look at it and rule on the validity of that filing. And I think at this point, we've seen enough White House renovations and we've seen enough updates to the White House throughout the generations of presidents that we've had in D.C. that this is just one more of those instances. But because it is President Trump, anything President Trump does, the left is going to not just take issue with, but demonize him and anybody that supports him in that position, no matter what.
Yeah, folks, just so you know, this story about the ballroom and the judge broke before the story about the fake media saying it was going to be a threat to the separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary, even though the president has a seat put there by the Supreme Court justices inside the room so he can listen to oral arguments. That story broke after the ballroom story, and not one of them have said this judge is threatening the separation of powers on a clearly enumerated power of the executive branch to run their own business and make things better for their part of the government. Even it's not even if it was like added to the Supreme Court building, I get it. But come on, man. All right, we got to take another break. Last segment, Adam. We got to have a chance to talk about the war, Joe Kent, and terrorism. You are a professional in those fields. I'm a professional in those fields. We have to have that conversation. We'll be right back with Adams.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com.
A lot of you are hearing about Joe Kent today. He resigned as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center because he disagrees with the president's current military operation in Iran. Much of the attention is focused on his claim that Iran posed no imminent threat and that we were pressured into this conflict by Israel and its American lobby. That's led some to call him a traitor and question his loyalty to the nation. Now, let me be very clear. While he's obviously not aligned with the president's mission, and while I disagree with his assessment of the situation in Iran, Joe Kent is not a traitor. 11 combat deployments, 6 Bronze Stars, Green Beret, CIA, Gold Star husband. Nobody can honestly question this man's loyalty to this nation or even to the president simply because he resigned over a policy disagreement. And Kent did the right thing. The president needs people around him who support his decisions rather than undermine anything from the inside like others have done. Kent simply stepped aside. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, his public characterization of the situation is absolutely open for debate. But when you consider his 11 deployments and the fact that his wife Shannon, a Navy senior chief and cryptologist, was KIA in Syria, it's completely understandable that he'd want to avoid new conflicts in the region. That doesn't come from disloyalty. It comes from sacrifice. We can disagree with his take and still respect the man and still respect his service. That's not weakness. That's how America is supposed to work.
Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. And, that's David Pollack right there, who's got a new show on One American News, folks. So go check it out. Everything David said there, I've said myself since Joe Kent publicly delivered his resignation letter. I totally disagree with his characterizations in the letter. I don't even agree with the timing of the letter. He should have done it when the operation started, not 2 weeks into it. But he did the right thing. He did what I and many others have called for people to do, that if you can't step up to the plate and fulfill the mission on a president's policy, and you are either a political appointee or a government employee, either way, you take an oath to the Constitution. If you can't support those policies 100%, then you should leave. So I can't disagree with what Pollack said there, because I've said those things too. My guest today is retired Green Beret Adam Smith, and Adam, a lot going on. The president's making a big speech tonight. Nobody knows really what it's going to be about. Some are saying we're leaving NATO. I tend to think it's probably going to be about the war. He's been signaling for several days now that he thinks he's got some doable in-state agreements from whoever is in charge over there. If they can confirm they're actually in charge, that's the risk there, I think. But Kent's an issue. I see it on both sides. People yelling and screaming one way or the other. I think most people are where Pollack and I are at.
Yeah, I agree with everything Pollack said. I agree with everything that you said. And ultimately what he did was he did the right thing. If you can't agree in totality with the policy, you have to you can push back on that policy, and you can push back to provide your wisdom and your insight and your advice. But ultimately, if a decision's made and you just can't stand with it, then that is your job to resign at that point and allow somebody to be in that position that can actually make a difference. No, I don't think that Kent is a traitor by any means. And I would say this openly to anybody who would say that Kent's a traitor: just don't say it to my face. And I'll just put that out there. I have a lot of respect for Joe. I think he's a man of his word. I think he's a man of integrity. He's a man of service. He honorably served this country for a multitude of years. And he shed his blood, and he watched his brother shed blood for the defense of this nation. So I don't think that Kent is a traitor by any means. Now, let's move into the topic at hand, which is really ultimately boils down to why did Kent step away in general? If we look at the authorization use of military force that was authorized after 9/11 took place, It states in general that the president is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided terror attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or, and here's a critical piece, harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States and such nations, organizations, or persons. Now, let me just read this list to you, Colonel, and to people that are listening. November 1979 to January 1981, U.S. Embassy hostage crisis in Tehran. 444 days, 66 American hostages that were held at the embassy in Tehran. 1983, the Beirut U.S. Embassy bombing in Lebanon. 1983, the Beirut Marine Barracks bombing in Lebanon. 1983, U.S. Embassy bombing in Kuwait City. 1984, kidnapping and murder of Station Chief William Buckley. 1984, U.S. Airways Flight 221 hijacking. 1985, TWA flight. 1989, murder of U.S. Marine Corps Colonel William Higgins. 1996, the Khobar Towers bombing. 1990s to 2000s, multiple Hamas and PIJ suicide bombings in Israel and other locations that had Western interests and alliances with the United States. 2003 to 2011, campaign against U.S. forces in Iraq. The IRGC Quds Force trained, armed, and directed Shia militias and their surrogate forces out of Iran, killing at least 603 U.S. troops. Roughly 1 in 6 U.S. combat deaths in Iraq during that time period came from Iranian-backed surrogate forces. How about January 2007, the Karbala Provincial Joint Coordination Center attack in Iraq? 1998, U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. The list continues to go on and on and on, and I'm not even halfway through the list. For nearly 50 years, the IRGC has been a terror, not just to the United States, but to the world in general. And any coalition force that aligned itself, NATO, the United Nations, and the like, with any U.S. interests in the world, Iran took not only personal interest in, but declared that they were the enemy of Iran. I blame every president up to this president now, even including President Trump in his first term, for not taking definitive action against Iran and not eliminating Iran as a threat globally. And if we take Israel off the plate for 1 second, if we just take them out of the strategic conversation for a moment, the list that I just read had nothing to do with quote unquote Israeli interests. It had everything to do with American lives and American interests. And for those who say, well, we don't have legal impetus in order to make this attack, you can't punch me in the mouth 20 years ago and then have me come destroy you 20 years later. We have been in a war with Iran and the IRGC since the Ayatollah took power in that country. It has not changed. And they have actively sought out every opportunity to attack the United States and U.S. interests. Those are all acts of war, not just acts of violence and terror, but acts of war. So if we have a justification now was as good as 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago when presidents didn't take action. Now, let's go one step further, and then I'm going to land my plane because I'm actually get pretty fired up about this. I take major issue with this. Nobody complained and nobody raised any issue when President Obama sent billions of dollars to Iran in palletized cash on a C-141 in a midnight flight to Tehran. And they didn't say anything about it when those dollars flooded into Iraq in the form of explosively formed penetrators that killed American soldiers and coalition forces in Iraq at the time. The fact that 1 in 6 U.S. deaths in Iraq are directly attributed to Iran. Where are people? Why are they not up in arms with this? Why are they not referencing this information? At the end of the day, that is a directed action against U.S. interests in an act of war, and we have never pushed back until now. And I'd say it's about damn time.
Absolutely, and I would just add to it that you read the post 9/11 AUMF, and Iran is known to have harbored Al Qaeda members, and Al Qaeda is the group responsible for 9/11. So, I mean, that it fits. The authorization is there. I trust this president. I helped get him reelected and helped get him elected in the general in 2016 because I'm opposed to the endless war policy that was crafted over my last 15 years in the military. And I might add that I was in uniform from the total time this Iranian government was put in place up until almost 2012. So the entire time of my Air Force career, I was subject to being killed by these Iranians working for this government because of the various jobs that I did and places that I was located at. So I have no problem saying it. And I think that this president earned his stripes with the Soleimani attack, and even more so with how he's done Venezuela. He's not interested in new endless wars in the Middle East. He's not interested in new wars. This is an old war, and anybody arguing against that, I think, is just off their rocker. This is
right.
the oldest war the United States has had thrust upon it in modern times. Oftentimes the United States gets war thrust upon it, and it has to respond. This war was thrust upon us, and not one president until the current 47th president of the United States took action. Now, in his first administration, he killed Soleimani. That was a good start. I liked it because Soleimani's the guy that was running the stuff into Iraq and people and resources and those EFPs and those kind of things, getting our people killed. And I think there's still some of that going on today with the Iranian-backed militias that are attacking our forces and having to be taken out by a certain airplane that goes burr a lot. In addition to them taking out small boats in the Strait of Hormuz. But quite frankly, this president's earned my trust. I don't think he's planning a massive full-scale invasion of Iran. I think he's working towards the end state for those three military objectives he's been talking about incessantly, even though the media can't seem to understand the words, destroy their ballistic missile capability all the way through production, destroy their Navy all the way through production, and prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon. No matter what occurs, that's what we're going to do. That's the strategic center of gravity. I know the media wants it to be the Strait of Hormuz, but that's already started turning around even before any announcements are made. And I'm hoping tonight's the announcement that he's found somebody that has enough power to cut the deal and solidify the end state there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And I think ultimately, if we were looking at a legitimate ground war invasion, there would have been a mass movement of troops in preparation for that initial push. Not to mention a whole lot of special operations efforts that were taking place along the borders prior to the initial airstrike. So to those individuals who keep saying that this is another one of those broken promises that we're getting into a forever war, I think you just have to take a deeper look at it, because that's just not the case from what I see.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but there's no massive movement of troops. I estimated, based on my bar napkin numbers, 600,000 to do the invasion, and you need 1 million to hold it. So that's a lot of forces. Nowhere near those levels of combat ground forces are in position in order to do anything like that. It's going to be interesting to see what the announcement is. I have no idea what's going to happen. There's a lot of options, and Exeth and Kane and the team and Cooper have given the president massive amounts of options. We got a lot left in our toolkit, so to speak, that we could use if necessary. But like I think Pete said it yesterday in his live press conference, he said we'd rather not continue to have to do the military stuff if there is somebody that has enough ability to surrender.
Yeah, that's the call, right? That's the effort. Yeah. Every time you see these press conferences, when they come out and say something, they're not just having a conversation to have a conversation. They're sending an international message.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on today. Stay in touch. I want to know what your future plans are. Tell folks how they can help you and your team now, because you're still working. You're still doing good things for people, I'm sure, all around the country, but especially in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, first thing is savageops.org. If you want to support the operations with regards to the nonprofit and doing disaster relief and recovery, as well as building homes here in Western North Carolina, you're welcome to go there, click on the donate, or join the team and submit your information that way. If you're ever looking for training and you want to learn how to shoot and fight from a former Green Beret who also apparently lost his congressional race, you can always go to savagefreedoms.com and you can reach out to me there. But more importantly than that, if you want to forward the mission of Christian constitutional conservatism in the United States, send me a message on X at Savage Freedoms or at Adam R. Smith 4NC, because we haven't taken that stuff down yet.
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much, my friend. God be with you. God bless you and America. Tomorrow's Truth Thursday. Brandon Strock is going to be with us. We're talking about MAGA's tribalism and how to keep it from tearing itself apart. I'll see you then.